Welcome to the Veterinary Blueprint Podcast, brought to you by Butler Vet Insurance, hosted by Bill Butler. The Veterinary Blueprint Podcast is for veterinarians and practice managers who are looking to learn about working on their practice instead of in their practice. Each episode, we will bring you successful, proven blueprints from others both inside and outside the veterinary industry. Welcome to today's episode.
Welcome to another episode of the Veterinary Blueprints Podcast. I am your host, Bill Butler. And as always, we're bringing the business and entrepreneur mindset to the veterinary industry. And I'm your host, Bill Butler. As I mentioned, our guest this week, I had the pleasure of meeting. I was just down at VMX in Florida and met so many great people. I just happened to be standing at a booth, and this gentleman walked up, and we got connected by the person I was speaking with, and we hit it off. We had bumped into him a couple times during the show out on the exhibit floor, and he introduced me to some people. It was a really good time, and so I'm grateful to be able to bring Joe Flick from Carr Commercial Realty, and he has informed me that Carr Commercial Realty is the largest tenant buyer brokerage firm in the United States. He represents Central Florida, and I'm happy to bring Joe Flick onto the podcast today.
Hey, Bill. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you and I just happened to bump into each other, as often happens at these kind of shows, especially that show. I mean, that's a amazing show. I've never been to VMX. How many times have you been to VMX?
That would be my fourth year running in some capacity. Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right.
So you've been attending as a commercial real estate professional with Carr. And so why don't you give us a little background on yourself and who Carr is and how they fit into, and specific the healthcare space. I think that's probably the quantifier for Carr, right? They're the largest tenant buyer brokerage for healthcare. So why don't you give a little background on yourself and who you are and what Carr is to the veterinary world?
Sure. Yeah. That's kind of a mouthful, isn't it? Saying
it is
largest tenant buyer. But it qualifies. So essentially what it means is that we work specifically for doctors, in my case, mostly veterinarians, and we work on their behalf. So we work one side of the equation. I don't work for landlords. I don't work for sellers. I only work for people that are actively looking for real estate in some capacity.
Sure.
And we, like I said, we further kind of, hone in on the healthcare field, and then specifically with veterinarians. So it specializes us. It doesn't pigeonhole us per se, but we can really, pardon the pun, we can really vet properties and get the correct ones in front of our potential tenants and buyers so that they don't waste time on properties that just don't make sense for them.
So my lease is up the end of June this year. So we're recording this in late January 2024. My lease is up in June of 2024. And I got to tell you, just trying to find commercial office space, even though there's a ton out there right now because of the current market here in 24, it is a royal pain in the butt. Not all the locations are listed and all the rates are negotiable. And just out trying to look on, LoopNet or whatever, your local area has, LoopNet's national, but, CBRE and all these, they don't list everything and they don't show where everything is. And, I just want to know what the dang rent is per square foot. And do you have the 15 to 1700 square feet I need for my insurance operation? And I have to imagine when you're working with your clients that you run into the same thing. And so, if you're a veterinarian looking to open a practice or expand to a new location or buy something, why should they hire a commercial real estate agent, and specifically one who, as you said, knows the industry?
That's a great question, Bill. And you hit the nail on the head with when it comes to that. It doesn't matter if you're a veterinarian or a small business owner, whether you have one location or 7 locations. At the end of the day, you're a small business owner, you know what you're doing. You're either taking care of your business, taking care of patients. That's what you've trained to do. That's what you love to do. Doing something like this, trying to find a space to lease, trying to renew your current lease, which we'll get down the road and we'll talk about a little bit down the road. That's all after hours things. You don't have time for that. And on top of it, you're not an expert in that area. So you don't know what the market can bear. Like you said, a lot of those properties aren't going to have the base rent listed. What type of
lease term
lease is it?
negotiable and
Exactly, negotiable.
And the rate and the square foot's negotiable is like,
Yeah.
what the heck does that mean?
What does that mean? Yeah.
And if we build it out,
too.
if we build it out, we're gonna throw in an extra $5 a square foot, or you can build it out, or there's just so many different things. So, I think as you're kind of talking, how did you wind up where you are specializing with veterinarians, and then figuring out that you like working with them, and then how do you help your clients, whether they're looking to buy or lease a space?
Great question. So, I'll give you the short story on that. My path was a little odd, but not quite as crazy as some of the ones I've heard coming to Carr. I was in the restaurant industry for a long time. I worked nights, and it wasn't really conducive to family life. And one of our agents at the time, he lived in the neighborhood. We had kids the same age that were playing together, and we kind of just all gravitated towards each other. And he told me what he did, and he told me they were opening a commercial. So Carr is healthcare tenants and buyers, and at the time, we had a strictly commercial version of what we do as well. Same process, same methods. But anybody, let's say we had a doctor that had a cousin that owned a nail salon, and they had a lease renewal, or they were looking for a second location. Yes, we could do that, but that's not what we're best at. That's not what we're known for. And so we opened a division that would focus on helping those tenants and buyers, those clients out. And that's what I was brought on to do with my restaurant background. I worked with a lot of, of course, restaurants, karate dojos, nail salons,
your general strip owners. Mall.
Yeah. Yep. General strip mall. Yep. Users.
Tenants, right?
Yep. Tenants, people that were buying too. And, while it was good, I think, COVID, that was 2019, and in the beginning of 2020, of course, COVID hit. And, we really started to refocus and think about, what it is that we were good at, and that's helping people that help people, healthcare professionals, doctors. And so we kind of reorchestrated a little bit, and that brought about my position being liquidated in the commercial industry. And I went straight to another buddy of mine, a partner at the time. He was working with optometrists, ophthalmologists, chiropractors, and veterinarians. And I jumped into his pipeline. It was a match really that worked out well for us. He needed someone. He was overextended, didn't have time for his family. And I was already there. He didn't have to hire me and train me. I already knew how Carr worked and what happened. So I kind of just stepped into his pipeline and hit the ground running there. And veterinarians were and probably are still about 60% of my portfolio, and who I really focus the most bandwidth on working with, simply because they're fun to work with. They're great people. They're great people to work with.
Yeah. And that's why, we've enjoyed doing it as well. So, kind of back to that first question, why hire a commercial real estate agent? Like, I'm not a real estate agent. I'm not a realtor. And so trying to figure out lease negotiations, what's available. All the building managers don't list rates and don't. And what's funny is I've reached out to, in my own search for my own office space, you reach out and go, oh yeah, we don't list everything online. You're like, well, how the heck are you going to, who knows what's available?
They do that. Yeah. They don't want people to kind of fish for pricing. So, they don't want you to be able to compare one building to another. And they use it, I guess, as bait for people that aren't experienced in the real estate industry to call out. If you're going in on your behalf, the landlord or the listing agent's doing a cartwheel in the background, because they know that you're not trained in this industry. You don't have any market knowledge, and that more than likely you're going to pay
whatever
more than market rent.
Whatever
and you're not going to get the concessions that maybe you should be getting in that market.
Here's what's crazy. Here's what's crazy, Joe, is that, and this for everyone out there, when you start clicking on real estate listings for whether it's buy or lease, they have so much tracking stuff out there that I just go to their website and they start calling my office. And I'm like, how the heck did they get all my contact info off of me just looking at a listing on LoopNet? And, Joe's laughing at this, but like, seriously, I would get 3 to 4 calls a week just shopping online. And it's like the ad
like
thing.
Shopping for insurance.
Exactly. And so like say shopping for insurance, we're hot on your tail. And so I think, one thing that you could do as the commercial real estate professionals, act as that buffer where I'm not getting hit up by every property manager that I looked at, right?
Yeah. No, yeah. Buffer is a great way. That's actually a good way of putting it, because we're helping you. It's always going to be an emotional process, because it's a very, it's a financially burdensome process to you in some capacity. You're
putting a huge
taking out a large loan.
Yeah, you're putting a huge investment personally and monetarily into this thing, and you want it like that's your baby. That's where you're going to spend more time than a lot of times more time there than you are at home, other than sleeping, right?
Sure. No, you're absolutely right. So being able to be in that position where we can filter the information that we're getting from the landlord or the seller, because we know how the game's played and we know the tactics they're going to use to posture their location or their product in a certain way towards us. So we can take that information, we can filter it, and we can put it in the context needed in order to give you the sound bites of what you need at the end of a long day, or during, when you step out of an exam room for a couple of minutes after seeing a patient, to really see the bullet points of, hey, this is where we're at. This is where I think we need to be. This is how we push back, and this, that, or another way.
Yeah.
And I'm really simplifying it, but that's essentially what we're there for, to be your advocate. And from that perspective too, because we only represent tenants and buyers, we don't represent landlords and sellers, we can enter into a fiduciary agreement with our clients. Mm-hmm. We're actively and legally working actually on your best behalf, because there's no conflict of interest. We don't list properties on the other side. We don't have a tenant looking for a couple of spaces that we're steering. Steering's a bad word in our industry.
That actually happened to me, because I was going to look at one property and they said, well, we have this other property. We'll meet you there. We can look at that. And I'm like, I don't want to look at that building. It's attached to a bar, or what? Like there's a bar. They share a parking lot with a bar. Like I want my insurance agents. And so, I was like, I didn't want to look at that property, but hey, I'm going to meet you here, and we're going to look at this other property because this building's more vacant than the one that I'm trying to lease out to you. And I was just like, I mean, I knew it was happening, but if you think about veterinarians, they just don't have time to screw around with that. So,
correct.
If you're a veterinarian and you're thinking, I either need a new space, I need to expand, or I'm going to start a practice, from your perspective of what you do, and you're based in Central Florida, just to put that out there. So you didn't have to go far to hit VMX, but you're in Central Florida.
Right in my backyard.
It was right in your backyard.
Right in my backyard.
We escaped the cold weather to come down there. Should they lease? From your perspective, should they lease or buy?
That's a good question. And the answer is it depends. And the process is that initial phone call conversation that we have is really about getting to know each other, establishing a rapport, establishing trust, but also talking about what your visions and goals are. What stage of your practice life are you in? What's the end game here? Have you talked to your financial advisor? Do you have a CPA that you use?
Yeah. So getting your professional team together. So a real estate agent, lender,
exactly.
CPA, attorney, insurance, like those are kind of the 5 biggies that you really, if you're thinking about either leasing, buying, because if you lease, you still might need a build out loan. So you got to get the lender involved. And at some point you're going to have to put a downstroke down. That's where the financial advisor comes into play to say, can you afford to suck in your cheeks a little bit to jump in? Right.
Well said. And it's, yes. And, if you can purchase, great. But I guess or if you want to purchase, I should say, then great. But we just need to know what kind of sandbox we're playing in and what can the market bear. So you might say, hey, Joe, I've got, $4 million just sitting in my bank account. Let's go to town. I'm like, well, the areas that you're looking in, there's next to nothing. And most of the transactions are happening off market because people are going over each other to try to buy this property when it becomes available. And there are several markets like that down here too. So it's just kind of it's setting the expectation level. Like, yeah, well, you want to be there. Well, so do 7 other people that I know. And, probably 10 times that out there in the open market as well. So letting them know what it is, what kind of financial buying power they have if they're looking to purchase, or also breaking down, and we have the ability to do that with some spreadsheets that we have, breaking down what it's going to look like. So, okay, hey, buying in this area, it's about $300 to $400 a square foot. Let's say they want what is a 2,000 square foot building. So we need to make sure that we're factoring in everything that we need, including insurance, to see what that bottom number monthly basis.
Florida's a whole different situation when it comes to insurance. We were chatting at VMX about, insurance, and he said, "Oh, well, I don't have to worry too much about the coastal stuff. I don't deal with Fort Myers, or I've got some counterparts that I send stuff to. Central Florida, it's not as bad. We have our own issues up here in the Midwest right now with insurance, and so I think." Like you were saying, having a really good game plan and understanding about, well, this is what I want to try and do. How do all the pieces of the puzzle fit into play? I was actually on the phone with a veterinarian this morning from Miami, and their loans held up because the insurance they thought they had, they were not going to get now. And so, it's trying to put all those pieces of the puzzle in place. You might have the perfect spot, but financing, insurance, the next door neighbor, the roof age isn't the right, or the rehab cost might be too much. Now you don't deal with vacant land buildups, do you?
Yeah, we can help with that. Absolutely. So that's another part of the conversation that we have at that initial reach out is, if there's nothing there, let's go make that. Let's find vacant land if it's available too. Let's talk SBA loans versus conventional, see what that looks like. And then, really finding out if we're talking purchase or bringing in the partners that we need. There are developers out there all day that love veterinarians because I think we talked about this too. Their default rate is next to zero. They're some of the lowest, if not the lowest, in the entire commercial real estate sector in terms of how little they, or how sure of a thing they are. So lenders love them. And, there are plenty of financial packages out there that lenders can put together, of course, depending on credit, cash flow, everything to make that a possibility for them. And that's just extending the conversation as well. And we're there to handhold them throughout that whole process. There are a lot of perceived obstacles that come up during the real estate transaction process. And we're there to reassure them that, this isn't the first time we've done it. We're not reinventing the wheel on it. We're going to show them, the best avenue to get the deal done, and to make sure at the end of the day that they're not getting taken advantage of, and that they have peace of mind at the end of the night, knowing that they saw and assessed all the options that were out there in the market, and that they made the best decision for themselves, their family, and their practice.
So, where do you generally fit in the food chain, so to speak? So I'm insurance. I'm always last. Everybody calls me right before, they have to get the documents into underwriting at the lender. Do you generally get the call first, or does the bank get the call first, or do they call their, where do you fit in that food chain or pipeline, so to speak?
So I'm usually near the front simply because they're having an initial conversation with, their family, and then they're having it with either a lender or they're getting on, like you said, CoStar or LoopNet or one of those platforms and just looking to see what's out there. And after a while, usually they come to the same realization that you did, Bill, that, I'm overwhelmed. I'm in over my head here.
I don't want to do this anymore, but I need some space. So what the heck am I going to do now?
Exactly. Well, what the heck am I going to do now? So they call a real estate professional that knows what they're doing, hopefully, and that works specifically with vets, similar to your world. Could you work with, just any agent out there? Sure. But if you have the ability to work with someone that knows and understands the process specific to you, I mean, that's a game changer.
Well, in your industry, right? Because building out an optometry facility versus building out a veterinary practice are two totally different situations.
Correct. Same or different suppliers, different vendors, different people that you need to surround yourself with to make sure that you're making an informed decision. Yeah, you're absolutely right there.
Well, and I'm sure when you're out there looking for your clients, you see, 4,000 square feet differently for a veterinarian than you do for the other parts of your practice, where it's 4,000 square feet for optometrist or a podiatrist or, somebody doing, a chiropractic clinic or something like that, where you look at that kind of blank canvas where it's at, if it's a lease space or a purchase, and you go, yeah, this really isn't it's not going to work for a veterinarian, but it would work great for this other industry. Or, hey, optometrist guy, this is really good for veterinary practice. Let's get one of them in there. So,
and sometimes you're right there, Bill. We reverse engineer it. I mean, we're like, hey, this is a great spot. There's nobody within a mile and a half. The demographics are great. The growth, the average household income is up there. What do I need to do to find a veterinarian that's looking to show them this location? So, I have no vested interest other than the fact that there's a need. I've established a hole in the industry or in the local market there where somebody could go, and I'll reach out to, a local rep, somebody that works with veterinarians all day, and just say, hey, do you have anyone looking to expand into a different location, or any startups coming down the line? I've got a perfect place for them.
Sure.
So I mean, there are several different ways to get to the end game there. Most of the time it's with a client in hand at the very beginning, but a lot of times it's me finding the space before I actually find the client. And then going back to your original point there about looking at spaces and seeing a blank canvas, one of the first things that you need to know, especially in the veterinary world, in the local market, is what the zoning ordinances are. And they vary from county to county, municipality to municipality. And it's key. You don't want somebody that's coming in and looking at it, that's licensed in Florida, but looking at it from California, looking at a Google map, finding a spot. Okay, great. And then going down that path, jumping through all those hoops only to find out
it's zoned industrial, not commercial, and you're good luck getting it rezoned, or you're jumping through a million hoops.
Yeah.
I've worked with a couple businesses, both inside veterinary and outside, who just, it's like they find the perfect spot, and then they go, well, that was good for what was there, but you need X number of parking spaces versus square footage because you're changing the zoning and there isn't enough. And so, or there's one business was buying it, building, and the bus stop was in front of their space, and they needed pickup and drop off. And it just, it was like 15 trips in front of the city council to try and get the zoning change because there was a bus stop there. And you think, why is this so difficult? But the municipalities have their rules, and if you're not conforming to that, you might find the perfect spot, but again, it just won't work out.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we see that time and time again. We'll talk to doctors who bought land or bought a building, and then they have to turn around and sell it or find a different use for it simply because they didn't go through the due diligence process steps necessary to really, again, vet the property correctly before signing on the dotted line. And it's a big financial outlay from the very beginning to do something like that.
Oh, a huge time process too. I mean, not just the money, but also the time and personal. Right. Like if you go to buy something, you talked about it being an emotional decision. Like when you buy that building, you're ready to make it work, or lease a space. You're ready to make it work and get everything going. And if somebody throws the brakes on you, it's such a letdown.
Yeah, no kidding. Especially of something of that size and scope. And like you said, I think their time is just as important as the money, and a lot of times, usually those coincide, as we like to say, right?
So what's the most, between lease and buy, what do you see from your experience and with your counterparts at Carr being the largest tenant buyer broker for the health space? What's the most common real estate transaction that you see?
The lease renewal, really.
Really?
Lease renewals. And I'd say that's probably, of the transactions we have within all the different verticals that we do, I'd say it's usually 40 to 50% of each agent's pipeline. And that might be more with us than it is with other agencies out there because we go after them. First of all, it's not a transaction that you really think of when you think of commercial real estate.
Well, so I got my lease renewal offer from my landlord.
Yeah.
And it was frankly disappointing. I won't go into details because we're in the middle of my lease negotiation or it's coming up, but let's just say I was a little astonished, less than pleased. It was, hey, we're happy to renew you for 5 more years. It's like, really?
Yeah, I bet they are.
I've been here for 10, and I'm sure you want to renew me for 5. So what are some pitfalls that, like that example right there? I mean, your knee jerk is, well, I'm going to stay here for 5 more years. I mean, what do you do and what does Carr do to help those tenant renewals?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This episode of the Veterinary Blueprint Podcast is sponsored by Butler Vet Insurance. Being an insurance agent at Butler Vet Insurance, I've seen firsthand the difficulties veterinarians face insuring their practices. But did you know that we wrote the book on veterinary insurance? It's called Protecting Your Veterinary Practice: Insider Insurance Secrets Every Veterinarian Must Know. It's not just a book, it's a comprehensive guide that speaks to the unique challenges and insurance solutions for the veterinary community. With over 20 years experience from cyber liability to business auto and workers' compensation, our aim at Butler Vet Insurance is to reduce the stress of insurance for those dedicated to animal care. If you're a veterinary practice owner or manager and looking for some guidance on your insurance, follow our insurance blueprint. Discover the Butler Vet Insurance difference. And together, let's put the pieces of the puzzle together. Butler Vet Insurance, reducing the stress of insurance.
So the best thing that you can do from a tenant buyer brokerage firm after hiring one of us and game planning is have an open mind about what you're going to do with your next step. You can say, Joe, I love my landlord. I love where I'm at. There's no way I'm moving. And I say, that's great, Mr. Doctor, but what we really need to do is we need to talk about posture here, because the biggest threat that you can make to any landlord or get them to the table, because at the end of the day, they are seasoned real estate experts.
Mm-hmm.
They know what they're doing. They've likely been doing this for a long time. They have an agent maybe that's been doing this for a long time. They know how this dance works. You do not. So going to the market, showing you what's out there, and actually touring locations and negotiating on locations so that you have a good perception, not just of the base rent, maybe your triple net expenses as well, but also of what kind of concessions you can get from other places out there, your TI, your tenant improvement allowance from the landlord to physically build out a new space for them or for you. Free rent, the amount of time, free rent also on top of what you would get to build out the
You're
space.
making me think about the people I've been speaking with over the last 2 weeks here about what I'm potentially giving up, or like just walk in and go, oh, how much is a square foot? Oh, that sounds great. It looks awesome. Sign me up. And free rent, tenant build out, I'm sure like the finishes you're going to get, because the current spot we have, I'm just going to say 10 years ago, we didn't get what I would say is super nice stuff. So I don't even need to say, like, if I've got a year left on my lease, like that's probably a good time to start thinking, am I going to stay here? And if I'm going to go, and if I'm going to stay here, I should go find a Carr real estate professional somewhere in my locality. If you're in Central Florida, call Joe Flick and say, hey, my lease is up in a year. What do you think we should do? I'm going to get you on board and figure out how to maximize it. I'm going to stay here, but how do I get the best out of signing another 5-year or 7-year? Because I mean, realistically, if you're a veterinary practice, you're going to sign a 5 or 7. Like, you're not going to sign a 2-year lease.
You won't sign mostly because you're very vested in that space. Your build out is not cheap by any means. Dentists and vets typically have the most expensive build outs per square foot out of any of the healthcare industries, from what we see. So, I mean, even with startups there, the lenders are going to require a 10-year note. So they're going to want they're going to want the lease to match. 10-year. So they're going to want that in some capacity, either a 5 with a 5-year option or a 10-year. But going back to our original point there, and then we can kind of touch that if we have time. But the lease renewal process there, the best thing we can do is go in there with enough time. Usually 9 months to a year. If you're considering looking or we don't have any posture for retail spaces for lease in that area, we'll make our own posture. We'll look at locations in, ground up locations, or we'll say, Mr. Landlord, hey, he likes where he's at, but he needs more space. His dream is to build. You can't say that with 2 months left on your lease. They're like,
No.
yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Float a brick. We're going to go, you're not getting anything out of us. So what we need to do usually,
the loan process by that point, before you, let alone find a builder and land and the whole deal.
Exactly. And so, ideally 9 months to a year to 18 months. If we're looking at ground up projects, we're looking to at least posture ground up projects in the market there. But the best thing we can do is really go out, show them the market, show what's there. And I'd say about 40% of the time, we have tenants that will end up moving. They're not gung-ho. They didn't know they were gung-ho about moving until we actually got the process going, showed them other locations that got them excited about it, introduced them to different partners to help them move. Maybe they have more frontage, more visibility, more parking. They're accessing a different part of the market that they didn't have before by simply moving across to the other side of the highway. There are a lot of different things that come into play that really help us build and nurture that posture. So when we go to the landlord and we initially start that conversation, we have everything else already ironed out, all these other people looking to take us to the prom, all these other,
sure.
Landlords looking to take us to the prom. We have all this firepower in our back pocket to then begin the negotiation process saying, hey, Mr. Landlord, he's willing to stay, but we need to meet A, B, C, and D because the properties down the street are willing to do the same thing. We're not asking for the moon, but we're asking for
help us
fair
out.
Market rent.
Sure.
Yeah, fair market rent. A lot of times that there are escalations built into that year.
Oh yeah.
Into that rent on a year-to-year basis. Your lease probably has that too.
Yep.
Usually 3, 4, sometimes 5%. And after 10, 15 years of being in the same space, that usually outpaces the market.
You've escalated past market rate.
Yeah. So a simple reset saying, hey, let's get back down to market rate. Let's get them some free rent. Let's get some TI to it. It doesn't have to be the exact same as the spaces around, but equitable to it. So the TI maybe to refresh the space, get some new flooring in. Maybe that's worn out. All of that increases.
Why are you describing my current situation?
Yeah. See, hey, hitting home there, Bill. But all of that really, it moves the needle because it's typically one of the highest expenses behind payroll for any practitioner, especially veterinarians, is their real estate cost.
Yeah.
So being able to reset that can cost, it can save them tens, thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands over the course of a 5 or 10-year renewal.
Yeah. So moral of the story, if you're going to buy a space, if you're going to lease a space, or if you're going to renew a space, so it's pretty much covering everything you have from a veterinarian perspective, unless you've bought your own building and you're just set. But if you're thinking about opening a practice or moving to a new location, or you're a tenant and you've got a lease renewal, what you're saying is find a commercial real estate professional. Specifically, Joe would prefer a Carr professional, but there's plenty of professionals out there. But Carr knowing what they do, and so you're Central Florida, but Carr's national as far as
correct, yeah.
An organization. So if a veterinarian out there hears this podcast and they want to reach out to Joe Flick at Carr, what's the best way to do that? I know, you and I are on LinkedIn together. We'll get that information out there, but what's a good way for somebody to reach out to you, Joe?
You can reach me by email at joe.flick@carr.us, and that's CARR.us,
Two
United
R's.
States.
Yep.
Correct. Yeah. 2 R's there. And then I can put you, even if you're out of market, I can put you in touch with the local real estate agent that best serves you. Sometimes there are several, and it's nice to know which ones have the most experience and wherewithal with veterinarians there too. And I'm more than happy to put you in touch with the local market expert that you have there. And whether or not you use us or not, just make sure you're asking the right questions.
Yeah.
Make sure that they are tenant buyer reps only, typically, if that's possible, that they're only working for you and not for landlords, that they have experience in some capacity with veterinarians and the intricacies and nuances of working with those transactions. And then also make sure that they are able to really hone in and find spaces, be market experts, make sure they live, work, and breathe in your markets, drive them every day. Otherwise, it's impossible to keep up with expansion. Also, the hot spots, what's new, what's dated, what markets are dying, and which ones are coming up soon. So
Yeah. Well, you dropped a ton of gold nuggets for our listeners, Joe. It was a pleasure to have you on, and it was awesome meeting you down at VMX, and look forward to connecting this soon. For those of you who are catching this on a clip, I'm wearing my Royal St. Cloud pullover today, which is in Joe's backyard down in St. Cloud, Florida, in the Kissimmee area. And anyway, so it was great having you on, Joe. Of Central Florida, make sure to hit Joe up. Otherwise, we'll have his contact information. If you're looking for a commercial real estate professional, you can find one that specifically works in animal health space through Joe, and or just talk with one out there and make sure you're being represented by somebody who understands the industry that we all work in. So thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the Veterinary Blueprints podcast. Thanks for joining us, Joe.
Bill, it was a pleasure. Appreciate you, sir.
And as always, make sure to click, review, and share this with your friends. It does help with all the algorithms. And we will catch you on the next episode of the Veterinary Blueprints podcast. I'm your host, Bill Butler. Thanks for joining us.